There is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Poetry has never been the language of barriers, it's always been the language of bridges. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. Poetry and language are often at the heartbeat of movements for change. Let each dawn find us courageous, brought closer, heeding the lights before the fight is over. Poetry it's an art form, but, to me, it's also a weapon, it's also an instrument. It's the ability to make ideas that have been known, felt and said. And that's a real, I think, type of duty for the poet. When you're someone who's lived a life where certain resources were scarce, you always feel like abundance is forbidden fruit. But as for the future, I foresee a world which is more creative, more open, more loving, more ecologically friendly, more honest about its history and progress, and I think a lot of those contributions will be made by young people. You don't have to be a poet, you don't have to be a politician or be in the White House to make an impact with your words. We all have this capacity to find solutions for the future. My Instagram doesn't cover my insecurities, my lack of self-confidence. That week I spent crying. There's a question of whether I should be sharing that online. Most of my life I was particularly terrified of speaking up, because I had a speech impediment, which made it difficult to pronounce certain letters, sounds, and I felt like I was fine writing on the page, but once I got on stage, I was worried my words might jumble and stumble. My mom wanted to make sure I was prepared to grow up with black skin in America. The oration of poetry, I consider to be its own art form and tradition. I think we run into issues when our online brands are not rooted in who we are, and I think we need to have explicit discussions with ourselves about who we want to be, what we want to represent, and how we want to express that. I don't want it to be something that becomes a cage, where to be a successful black girl, you have to be Amanda Gorman and go to Harvard. I want someone to eventually disrupt the model I have established. That's kind of the challenging thing about writing an inaugural poem. You're speaking to everyone, but you don't also want to speak for everyone. One of the most rewarding moments of my career is when I'm speaking to a child who tells me they have the same speech impediment that I had to overcome and that they're going to keep writing or sharing their voice after hearing my story. Writing wasn't just a form of expression. It was a form of pathology by embarking on spoken word over and over and over again and reciting my poems. One of my delays was in speech and speech pronunciation, and also the auditory processing issue just means I really struggle as an auditory learner. When you are learning through poetry how to speak English, it lends to a great understanding of sound, of pitch, of pronunciation, so I think of my speech impediment not as a weakness or a disability, but as one of my greatest strengths. As a public poet, people often don't see the reality of my life. I was obsessed with everything and anything. I wanted to learn everything, to read everything, to do everything. I was constantly on sensory overload. I'd hoard dozens of books in my second-grade cubby, and literally try to read 2 at a time, side by side. What contributed to my writing early on is how my mom encouraged it. She kept the TV off because she wanted my siblings and I to be engaged and active. So we made forts, put on plays, musicals, and I wrote like crazy. To hone my voice, I read everything, from books to cereal boxes, 3 times, once for fun, the second time to learn something new about the writing craft, and the third time was to improve that piece. I did a lot of sitting back and thinking about what I wanted for myself and what I wanted for my country. More unity, more support for the arts, and more opportunities for young writers from marginalized groups. What's really funny about being National Youth Poet Laureate is that not everyone even knows it exists. Poetry is interesting because not everyone is going to become a great poet, but anyone can be, and anyone can enjoy poetry, and it's this openness, this accessibility of poetry that makes it the language of people. I was writing since I can remember. I just didn't know it was poetry yet, or that writing could be a career. Amanda S. C. Gorman, March 7, 1998, born in Los Angeles, California, Gorman was raised by her single mother, Joan Wicks, a 6th-grade English teacher in Watts, with her 2 siblings. Her twin sister, Gabrielle, is an activist and filmmaker. Gorman has said she grew up in an environment with limited television access. She has described her young self as a weird child who enjoyed reading and writing and was encouraged by her mother. Gorman has an auditory processing disorder and is hypersensitive to sound. She also had a speech impediment during childhood. Gorman participated in speech therapy during her childhood, and Alida Kocharian of the Harvard Crimson wrote in 2018, Gorman doesn't view her speech impediment as a crutch, rather, she sees it as a gift and a strength. Gorman attended New Roads, a private school in Santa Monica, for grades K-12. As a senior, she received a Milken Family Foundation college scholarship. She studied sociology at Harvard College, graduating cum laude in 2020 as a member of Phi Beta Kappa. In 2019, Gorman spent a semester studying in Madrid, Spain, supported by IES Abroad. Amanda S. C. Gorman is an American poet and activist. Her work focuses on issues of oppression, feminism, race, and marginalization, as well as the African diaspora. Gorman was the first person to be named National Youth Poet Laureate. She published the poetry book The One for Whom Food Is Not Enough in 2015. She rose to fame in 2021 for writing and delivering her poem, The Hill We Climb, at the inauguration of Joe Biden. Gorman's inauguration poem generated international acclaim, and shortly thereafter, 2 of her books achieved bestseller status, and she obtained a professional management contract. Gorman was highlighted in Time magazine's 100 Next list under the category of Phenoms, with a profile written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. That same month, Gorman became the first poet to perform at the Super Bowl, when she delivered her poem, Chorus of the Captains, at Super Bowl 55.